Today, we're trying something a little different. Today, I happen to be in Boston for a meeting alongside the Chelsea River. And behind me, I have the MH Columbia. You can kind of see her. A bulk carrier built in 2018 sailing under the flag of Singapore. And it's offloading salt for the upcoming New England winter. See the operations happening right there. I think you can probably hear it over the microphone. So it has me thinking, does the FMC regulate bulk carriers? Do you know? In a word, no. Let's break it down. Hi, welcome to By Land and by Sea, an attorney breaking down the week in supply chain, presented by the Maritime Professor, me. I'm Lauren Began, founder of the Maritime Professor and Squall Strategies, and I'm your favorite maritime attorney. Join me every week as we walk through both ocean transport and surface transport topics in the wild world of supply chain. As always, the guidance here is general and for educational purposes only. It should not be construed to be legal advice, and there's no attorney-client privilege created by this video or this podcast. If you need an attorney, contact an attorney. But before we get into the discussion of the day, let's go through my top 3 stories of the week. So we're going to go through these pretty quickly because, like I said, I'm on site today, but I'd be remiss not to hit my top 3 stories of the week. So story number 1, we've talked about it for a few weeks now. I just want to make sure that it stays top of mind. Commissioner Carl Bentzel, FMC Commissioner Carl Bentzel, his Maritime Transportation Data Initiative on behalf of the FMC released the request for information. That was a few weeks ago, as an opportunity to consider and comment on the MTDI recommendations and views report that came out a few months prior to that. So the RFI closed for comments on October 16th, but comments are still coming in, and so far there have been about 42 comments filed, which is so great. I am so thrilled by not only the amount of comments that have come in, but the range of comments. I mentioned this last week. We have a wide range of interests from the supply chain represented. We have trucking, dray, we have railroad, we have ocean carriers, we have shippers, we have associations. It really is such a good mix. And the comments continue to come in. So keep an eye on that. Comments haven't been turned away yet. The FMC tends to allow late filed comments. That's certainly true here. I'm not sure when it's going to be cut off, but I can tell you that the detention and demurrage comments were still being accepted as of August, according to the last commission meeting, and that closed last December. So I don't know. I'm just saying, get some comments in if you want to file comments, but you might still have a little bit of time. Go check out what some of the other comments are saying. It's pretty interesting. There's some really interesting information coming out through the comments, some interesting companies that you can watch, some interesting interest of stakeholder position. Go check them out. This is a really great discussion, and I think that you'll really enjoy reading through some of those comments. So, like I said, the FMC tends to accept late filed comments. Write something up, submit it. You never know. And like I said, we talked about this a few episodes back, but the RFI, the request for information, has a series of questions broken down by supply chain stakeholder groups. So they have importer, exporter, transportation service providers, et cetera. So I'm sure they wouldn't mind general comments as well. I think they really want to have this discussion. They want to have this engagement from the stakeholders in the industry, but they also have a series of questions if you want prompts. So go check it out. I covered this a few weeks ago in the episode if you want to dive in a little bit more, but I encourage you to go check out the comments that are coming in. So story number 2, the St. Lawrence Seaway has unfortunately shut down. There is a labor strike that started this week and is disrupting the imports and exports pathways from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. So again, if you're not totally familiar, the Great Lakes are homes. So it's Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior. Superior is less connected to kind of the system that is using the St. Lawrence Seaway on a regular basis. I'm from Michigan, so this is my homeland. But there's 13 locks that are shut down between Lake Erie and Montreal. And so the AP News is reporting that the St. Lawrence Seaway actually aids in the movement of over $12 billion worth of cargo just last year. And an interesting note about vessels in the Great Lakes, if you weren't familiar, there's some specific terminologies for some of those vessels that transit the Great Lakes. Those that stay inside the lakes are called lakers, and those that go outside into the ocean-going world are called salties. Just a little trivia tidbit. But so what's been happening here, right? So there's a labor strike. They've been negotiating for months, but the strike shutdown actually started this week, and they're set to resume discussions today. It's Friday, October 27th. Estimates on the financial impact are estimated anywhere from $50 million to $110 million a day. Look, I've talked about this before, that it seems like this is kind of the rise of the employee these days. We're a little further away from COVID, but remember, essential employees were not given the opportunity to um, go home, as we say, during COVID. And so they were essentially risking their lives. And certainly that's what it felt like in the moment. And so I'm not surprised to see, a rise in strife, I guess, between these negotiations. It's too bad when anything shuts down. I don't think any side wants to see actual shutdowns and strikes. But look, COVID was scary during those first few days, and these essential employees had to keep going. And there really wasn't that appreciation, or certainly maybe that's part of the message, is that there wasn't a true appreciation for some of those employees, some of those essential employees who didn't. And so now, some of that appreciation is they haven't had a salary raise since well before the pandemic began. And maybe that must be a for the union has said that they haven't had an increase in salary despite the cost of living and everyday life continuing to increase. But look, at the heart of a lot of these discussions is simply desire for appreciation for sacrifices made during the pandemic. And I'm painting a very broad brushstroke here, but I think it's something that's not necessarily as prevalent when some of these strikes and negotiations come up. So I'm not surprised. All this to say, I'm not entirely surprised by the many labor disputes that we're seeing in the recent few years. We are getting a little bit further away from the pandemic, but sometimes these are just on a regular recurrence of regular renegotiation. So hopefully this gets solved soon in the St. Lawrence Seaway. I just want to bring it to your attention. Look, as I'm standing in front of a salt offloading operation, it reminds me of how cold the Great Lakes are and the Great Lakes region, and how necessary salt imports are. I mean, in addition to all the other commodities that are importing and exporting through the St. Lawrence Seaway. But I mean, this is the fall, right? We're having warm temperatures out here in New England, but parts of Michigan are supposed to be getting some snow. Certainly the UP sees snow, the Upper Peninsula before the Lower Peninsula, but the whole Great Lakes region, both Canada and the U.S., we gotta solve this, right? Hopefully this can be solved. Like I said, I don't think either side really wants to see the shutdown continue, but let's see. We'll keep watching it. Like I said, they're set to negotiate again today to hop back into discussion. So hopefully something can be solved here. All right, story number 3. Last week we covered the caution of the downturn in the market and the caution that we, as an industry, shouldn't be so quick to assume that bankruptcies can't or won't happen, despite the record profits that a lot of areas of the supply chain saw in the past few years. So we're seeing it domestically on the surface transport side of things, this downturn, right? Certainly with some of the trucking companies and just some of the surface side of things. But I cautioned last week that we've seen a bankruptcy even fairly recently in the global ocean carrier world. So that was Hanjin in 2016. I also reported that Convoy, a Seattle-based digital freight broker, filed for bankruptcy last week. So this was the company, remember, that was backed by Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates. Well, this week, it looks like things might be looking up, at least for Convoy. It appears that there might be a buyer. So as it was closing its doors, it was clear that it wasn't for a lack of interest, certainly in how the tech and the business worked, as CEO Dan Lewis mentioned in his memo to the employees. But it was the recent slump in freight volumes, right? And that's what I'm being cautious about across the industry, right? And he was saying that that's what was really cutting the industry revenue. So perhaps we'll see Convoy again. Perhaps there will be new life. I think the digitization side of things, certainly this digital and tech side of things is something to keep an eye on. And like he said, it wasn't for the lack of interest in how the tech and the business work together. It was just the downturn in the freight. So, all right, well, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the day. Like I said, today's going to be a little bit faster than other weeks, but I hope you can hear the operations behind me. So especially our friends on the podcast listening, does it feel like you're down at the docks? Boots on the docks, right? So like I said, I'm up in Boston today I was sitting in a meeting alongside this working vessel. And like I said, it's the MH Columbia, a bulk carrier offloading salt for the upcoming New England winter. And it's been fun watching the bucket cranes grab the salt from inside the vessel and drop it alongside, to have the front loaders come scoop it up and build up large mountains of salt that are then being trucked out of the area, and they get weighed. And it's so fun to see operations of how it all works together. And, I thought how great it would be not only to have the working noise in the background, like I said, but to really make you feel close to the maritime world. But it got me thinking about bulk carriers and how people may not know where the jurisdictional authority lines lie for the FMC. So, as we know, we've talked about the Federal Maritime Commission quite a bit. It's an independent regulatory agency that has sole jurisdiction in the U.S. over competition, practices, and service in the ocean shipping industry. Its mission to ensure a competitive and reliable international ocean transportation supply system that supports the U.S. economy and protects the public from unfair and deceptive practices. But what does that mean? Okay, so it covers the ocean shipping industry. So naturally, it seems like that may include all forms of shipping, but not necessarily. It's limited, right? So the FMC regulates many aspects of common carriage and liner shipping. So liner shipping is essentially the shipping of goods through cargo containers in a regular, kind of predictable, scheduled fashion. And this is spelled out in the statute. So remember, statutes in the United States, statutes are created by Congress and regulations are created by the individual agencies. So statutes essentially carry more weight and authority. So let's look to the statute. So in the statute, it is specially carved out that bulk is accepted. So under the tariff requirements, the accepted carve-outs include bulk cargo. It also includes forest products, recycled metal scrap, new assembled motor vehicles, waste paper, or paper waste. So it's also carved out under the service contract section, the same thing. So bulk cargo, forest products, recycled metal scrap, new assembled motor vehicles, waste paper, or paper waste. There's also a section on concerted action. And so this is where it might actually almost kind of involve bulk as part of FMC's regulatory authority or statutory authority, but not exactly. But okay, so let's see what it says. So concerted action. A conference or group of 2 or more common carriers may not, and under subpart 3, engage in any predatory practice designed to eliminate the participation or deny the entry in a particular trade of a common carrier, not a member of the conference, a group of common carriers, an ocean tramp, or a bulk carrier. There it is specifically spelled out. So that's the concerted action prohibition. And there it's listed. If you were to actually do a term search in the US Code, you'll see bulk is listed a few times, but mostly as a not included in this section or as a, well, but you still can't be monopolistic. So like I said, we're not very in the weeds today, really just highlighting the statutory language that's out there. You can look it up yourself. It's under Title 46, Chapter 401. It's even though bulk isn't there, the FMC also, so it's liner shipping for the most part, which is cargo container ships, right? That's mostly what we're talking about here. That's kind of what you assume the FMC regulates. It is pretty targeted toward just that, but it also, there is some authority over passenger vessels and cruise operations. And so today's an oversimplification of their statutory authority, but I would be remiss into not mentioning that the FMC also has some bonding requirements as it relates to passenger vessel operations and cruise operation or cruise line. And so the FMC requires sufficient financial coverage to indemnify passengers in cases of non-performance of the vessel. So if the cruise doesn't run, if it gets canceled, there have been some recent moments when that's been invoked. There were fires on cruise vessels, at the beginning of the pandemic. People were looking to the FMC and some of those requirements for the bond and what that would cover if it was a high enough amount. So those are some of the discussions that were happening. FMC also obviously regulates marine terminal operators in certain instances when they're filing schedules, kind of the rough equivalent of a tariff. So, it's interesting. As I was kind of looking through the statute here too, I was also looking under the concerted action section and the other things that might be part of that, what can't happen. And so under concerted action, a conference or group of 2 or more common carriers may not. And subpart 1 and subpart 2 are kind of interesting. I just want to mention them. So subpart 1, they may not boycott or take any other concerted action resulting in an unreasonable refusal to deal, or they may not engage in conduct that unreasonably restricts the use of intermodal services or technological operations. So, so that's kind of the overall general gist here. I see that we do have a comment here. So break bulk reefer cargo, essentially, like I said, it's mostly just the liner cargo, containerized cargo movement in the liner scheduled trade. So if you're looking outside of that world, for the most part, the FMC doesn't regulate that. Again, anything specific to a question that you have, I would advise you to seek legal advice. None of this is legal advice. This is just general educational information. But again, the FMC is mostly just in the ocean cargo shipping world, and everything that things that it touched to, right? So that also is throughput of cargo. There's some where it can touch on the land side. But so again, today was an oversimplification. Today was just kind of I saw a bulk vessel. I thought, hey, let's chat about it. As always, the guidance here is general and for educational purposes. It should not be construed to be legal advice directly related to your matter. If you need an attorney, contact an attorney. But if you have specific legal questions, feel free to reach out to me at my legal company, Squall Strategies. Otherwise, for the non-legal questions, the e-learning, and general industry information and insights, come find me at the Maritime Professor. Maybe we'll do more on-site visits like this. This is kind of fun. Let me know if you like the background noise, if you can hear me at all. I'd love the feedback. So if you like these videos, let me know, comment, like, and share. If you want to listen to these episodes on demand, or if you missed any previous episodes, check out the podcast by Land and by Sea. If you prefer to see the video, especially today, you get to see the operations a little bit. They live on my YouTube page by Land and by Sea, presented by the Maritime Professor. And while you're at it, go check out the website, themaritimprofessor.com. So until next week, this is Lauren Began, the Maritime Professor, and you've just listened to By Land and by Sea. See you next time.